Hello, this is Dr. Flight. In this segment, we're going to spend a little bit of time introducing the idea of attribute-based approaches for designing product concepts. And in particular, we're going to spend some time looking at different types of perceptual maps, how they are designed, and the benefits of using a perceptual map when creating new product concepts. In this segment, we're going to introduce the idea of attribute-based approaches to concept generation and product generation, and we're going to focus on the different methods, specifically using a perceptual map to help identify what attributes are important to customers and which ones we could use in creating a new product to form a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So the basic idea here is that products and services are made up of a series or a composite of features or characteristics or attributes. And so if we want to create a new product, one of the techniques is to change some of the attributes of an existing product, and then you'll have a new one. So in order to know, though, what attributes to change, we want to know which ones are important to customers, which ones we can change effectively, can change well. We may also want to know what attributes our competitors are particularly good at or bad at, and that may provide us some opportunities to create a new product that customers will like. When we think about the attributes of a product, we can designate them as features, functions, or benefits. In general, what we think of is that a feature is something that permits a function to provide some type of a benefit. So we have a product feature which allows for or commits the product to some function, which then in turn provides the customer the benefit that they wish to receive from the product itself. So when we talk about features, again, these would be selling points that differentiate one product from another. So specific details of the product, size, quality, price, materials, components, things of that nature that can be changed, added, deleted, improved upon, and so forth, would be features that the product has. So this might be a list of selling items or selling points that you want to identify for the customer, and they will recognize that one product has certain features while another one doesn't, or they'll recognize that the features that one product has are distinctly different from another product's. The function is how the product works, specifically to meet some type of a need. So it might be the mechanical process or the process or the function, the workability of the product in order for it to actually work. So the function is that. Benefits, as we already know, are the results of the function or the results that emerge from using the product that satisfy a consumer's need or a want. So again, the features are the selling points of the product that differentiate one version or one product from another, one brand from another. The function of the product is what is actually done in order for the product to be used. The benefits are the results of the function being performed that the product has. And so all three of these could be thought of as elements or attributes of a product, and they could be differentiated as such. When we look at attribute-based concept generation, one of the tools and techniques that we use is something called a gap map or a perceptual map, in order to identify where we are or where our brand is compared to our competitors in the minds of the consumer. So we actually have three different types of perceptual maps that can be created. And again, sometimes these are referred to as gap maps because when the map is created, we often look for areas in the map where we could place ourselves, or areas that are underserving the customer, and they're represented by gaps in the perceptual map. I'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. But to review what types of gap maps exist, there's one called a determinant gap map. A determinant gap map is a perceptual map that's been created, but it's been created by internal personnel within the firm, and specifically we think of it as something that the manager, product manager, or product development team would create themselves based on their perception of the marketplace and the industry that's currently serving a group of consumers. So a determinant gap map is one where we go ahead and we kind of position our product in, where we think it lies relative to other products on certain features or for certain functions or benefits. But again, it's restricted to our view of the marketplace and our view of competition. Clearly, this is not ideal because the gap map will be heavily influenced by our perception, and our perception as a manager may not accurately represent what the customer views. But on the flip side, this is something that we can do very quickly, very efficiently, and we can go ahead and plot some places we think we are on the map fairly quickly. A more sophisticated and accurate approach is to gather data from the customer, and by doing so, we can create something called an attribute ratings map. So what we do is we ask customers, oftentimes in a survey, to rate on a scale the performance of our brand relative to our competitors, and also our competitors' brands as well, on certain key attributes. So those would be features, functions, or benefits that they feel are important to the product. Ideally, what you do is have customers rate all of our competitors or several competitors all at once, as well as ourselves, and we have a set of attributes that we want them to look at, and maybe on a rating scale like 1 to 7 or 1 to 10, rate our product on these different features or benefits, and rate our competitors as well. And then we can take that data and we can directly place it onto a perceptual map. So that would be an attribute ratings map. These take more time, of course, and they take the cost of doing the market research, but they're far more sophisticated. They're far more true to reality, and they actually measure your market, which is a key point in a lot of things we do. The other thing is they can be a lot more detailed and specific. So if I see that we are outperforming a competitor on a specific attribute, that gives me what I need to know when I go and design my marketing appeal or my sales appeal. I know to highlight this particular attribute because I know that my product outperforms everybody else's on it. It helps identify our key differentiating or unique selling positions for our particular product. At the same time, we can identify attributes that we perform particularly bad with, and that tells us what we need to improve when we're creating a new product. So if I want to improve sales, and if I want to maybe gain market share, if I want to be able to charge a higher price, which influences my profit margin, then I look for attributes that I don't perform well on and I improve those, and then in time I'm able to gain market position by doing so. So attribute rating gap maps, perceptual maps, can be very, very powerful to use. A third type of gap map is something called an overall similarities map, an OS map. So this type of map is similar to an attribute ratings map, except that what we're looking for are for product features um, that 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 we could compare from one brand to another. But in this case, what we want to look for are specifically we're looking for differences between groups of brands, and we want to see how far away we are from another brand. And this technique helps us do this. So again, we're talking with consumers, we're having them fill out surveys, we're collecting data from consumers, and what we typically do is we ask them how similar or how different one brand is to another. And so similarities and differences are measured that way, rather than maybe specifically by an attribute specifically. We might think of them as overall perceptions the consumer has of our brand and whether one is closer to another perceptually to them. Sometimes we use a technique called discriminant analysis. So this is a statistical technique that we use when we look at discriminant analysis. What we want to do is see which brands discriminate from each other or separate themselves from each other. And we can actually use data to measure the distance, the perceptual distance one brand has from another. So it's more of a global score where we take lots of variables and we measure the distance that one brand would have from another, and the further apart they are, you're probably thinking that the further apart they are, the less competitive they are with each other. Brands that are closer to each other are more direct competitors, and they're typically fighting each other for the same market share. Another technique that's used here is multidimensional scaling, MDS. So it's again another way that we can look at brands, and we can think of lots and lots of different product attributes all at once as a composite, and we want to again look at how one brand will compare to another from the perceptions of the consumer. And this is a statistical technique similar to discriminant analysis that will illustrate the distance that brands have from each other. As an illustration of a perceptual map, we have this one that deals with products that relate to snack foods or snack items. So here we have two different components. We have something called crunchiness, and we have something called nutritional value. Now, the axes of a perceptual map are actually something that we call determinant attributes. Determinant attributes. That's a term that we'll use to describe the axes that make up a perceptual map. And they're called this, determinant attributes, specifically because they help determine why and how a customer decides to choose a product. So these determinant attributes are important to the customer because they help determine whether the customer will buy the product or not. So in this perceptual map, what we have here is the assumption that nutritional value plays a strong role in having a consumer buy a product or not related to snack foods. It also assumes that crunchiness may be a key indicator as well as to whether somebody buys the product or not. So these are determinant attributes or determinant factors. Those are what make up the axes on the perceptual map. You'll also notice that we have a scale here for each axis. These are labeled from low to high. Okay, so from low to high is the axis range, or the range that each axis has. Sometimes we superimpose numbers on this, and those numbers would have corresponded to a survey that we had. So if somebody rated a certain product low, it might be a 1, and if it's high, it might be a 10, or something along those lines. And those numbers would specifically correlate to the data that we gathered from consumers from a survey. So we have a range, we have axes. The axes should be labeled, and those axes should be things that are, or attributes that are important to the customer. The plots that we have are plotted products or brands. In this case, they're products. Sometimes we use brands, though, if we're comparing our brand to another. And these plots then would also correspond to data that we collected. If this is a determinate gap map, then this is one where a manager placed these items onto the map perceptually where they feel the products or in this case the actual food or snack choices should be placed. If it's an attribute ratings map, then it's from consumer data, and consumer data has helped us plot where these should be. The last thing I'll mention is that there are areas inside the gap map or the determinant map or perceptual map here that suggest areas that are underserved. So there are areas here where there's a lack of, there's another kind of area in here, there might be another area in here. There are areas in this map where products don't necessarily exist, but a product could exist. And presumably in an area that is a gap, there should be markets of consumers in these areas who are being underserved. So there should be consumers that are in this area, for instance, that really don't have product options, but would buy a product option if one was available to them. This demonstrates a big opportunity for us. If we're entering the snack market, then we might see an area that's being underserved and produce a product that has just enough crunchiness and just enough nutritional value to sit in this area and be able to garner market share and sales. Okay, so the perceptual map has a lot of pieces going on to it and a lot of structure to it, but at the same time is extremely useful for a manager to help design a new product as they move forward. So there are a few steps to take when we're looking at developing a perceptual map. The first of which is to determine which factors will be used in the map. So again, these are the determinant attributes or the axes that we use specifically to plot our brands and products onto the map itself. They have to be important to the decision maker, and in this case, the decision maker is usually the customer. And they also need to be features or attributes that illustrate or show differences between brands. So if you have a feature and attribute and all of your competitors, we all basically do the exact same thing, that's probably not something that we want to use as a determinant factor. We want to choose factors that we differ with each other on and that are important to the decision maker or the consumer. Okay, so determining the factors, that's what we need to do. We also need to plot the objects that we're looking at onto the plane. The objects could be the products that we're looking at in our product class. They could be competitors, they could be brands, and so forth. So we would need to plot our objects onto our plane, which are the determinant attributes. Remember that these plotting features, when we actually place the products on there, this could be from a managerial's perspective if it's a determinant gap map, or external data from surveys or other data that's been gathered, especially if you're looking at a overall similarities map or a attribute ratings map, an AROS map. So we want to be able to gather data or use the manager's input, and that helps define where we will place our objects onto the actual map. The last general step is to be able to interpret the map and then take some type of strategy position as we develop new products. So if we are looking at areas where there's direct competition, we would look at places on the map where we have a number of competitors very, very close to each other. And so if we want to compete in that arena, then we position our products with the attributes that would match our competition. So to do this, we go ahead and build our product very similarly to one of our competitors with the goal of being able to take market share away from them. Our idea is we want to bring ourselves closer to competitors in areas that are profitable, where we can take market share and sales away from a vulnerable or potentially vulnerable competitor. That would be a head-to-head or direct approach. We can also find areas, as I mentioned before, where there are gaps or openings that could be exploited that nobody else is exploiting right now. So these would be specific niches or small groups of consumers that have some special needs where there's not a product for them available at this time. Keep in mind that smaller gap-based approaches require enough size for there to be profitability. So it might be that we might own enough or we might have enough space on the map that we call ourselves in a gap that hasn't been served yet, but we do need to make sure that there's enough scale and enough size and enough consumers so that when we enter that area, they'll come to us and we'll be able to make a profit and have enough volume for it all to make sense. Finally, if we're already in a marketplace, we can do this process over a number of times over time. So I can collect data today, I can collect data 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and I can start tracking our performance on the perceptual map over a period of time. And by doing so, I get a good idea of how my products are changing relative to my competition, and I can start repositioning myself if I choose to move in a direction that is either towards competition or maybe in a gap away from competition. But over time, this mapping technique is very, very helpful to track my strategy performance. And also it helps identify what my competitors are doing and helps identify what their strategies may be if I'm able to see where they have been and where they are going with their product design and product attributes. Okay, so to wrap up then, this segment deals with this idea of perceptual maps, the idea that we can use attributes, which may be features or functions or benefits of the product itself, to be able to create new products and new product ideas. We have different types of perceptual maps that exist. We talked about determinant, attribute, determinant gap maps, attribute rating maps, and then overall similarities maps. And then we walked through a 3-step process for perceptual mapping itself, which would you'd want to take into account the determinant attributes, which would be the axes of the map. We want to go through a plotting process using managerial perceptions or actual data from outside the firm, and in particular with customers probably. And then finally we want to be able to form some strategy and some product design decisions based on where we want to be on that map and where we want to move to. Okay, so that wraps up this segment.